Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Short and Sweet. My name is Jose Moreno. I'm an associate consultant with Concentrus. And today what I want to talk about is bill of materials. So you may be aware that NetSuite is discontinuing legacy bill of materials with the latest release 2023.1. They are only planning on fixing business critical issues, and they are recommending that customers think about transitioning over to advanced bill of materials. What I do want to make clear at this point is that while NetSuite will likely not be creating new enhancements or new features for legacy bill of materials, they are still fixing those business critical issues, and there isn't a requirement for you to make the change right away. Right, so we do have time to start thinking and planning about implementing this feature while it's being discontinued. By no means does that mean that you have to implement it right away. Aside from that, I do want to give you an overview of advanced bill of materials. So if you're coming from Legacy BOM, you may have a few questions on why you would use advanced bill of materials or how it differs from legacy bill of materials. So in this video, what I want to do is demonstrate how the feature works and hopefully provide you some clarity and some guidelines as you think about making that change over to advanced bill of materials. All right, so why advanced bill of materials? Right, compared to NetSuite's legacy bill of materials, advanced bill of materials offers a few functions that you may find useful in your manufacturing process. So number one, with advanced bill of materials, you can have multiple bill of materials per assembly item. So if you're working with legacy bill of materials, you may already be aware that when you create an assembly item, you embed the items or the components into that assembly item. So that's typically a sublist, and you add your items and associate those as components to that assembly item. With advanced bill of materials, you can have multiple bill of materials assigned or associated to an assembly because the bill of materials is now its own separate record apart from the item, which I'll demonstrate shortly for you. You may also want to think about having different bill of materials for in-house manufacturing or any outsourced manufacturing you do. Advanced bill of materials gives you that flexibility to be able to have that, have those different BOM formats. One thing I noticed is while you can have multiple bill of materials per assembly, you can also have a single bill of materials associated with multiple assemblies. This can help when you're creating new assembly items that have similar bill of materials that don't differ at all. This can help you assign those bill of materials quickly and efficiently. You can also have a zero quantity components on the bill of materials. So if you're working with Legacy BOM, if you ever try to add a component that had a zero quantity, as soon as you hit save, NetSuite would return a message telling you that it requires a positive number for that quantity. That's not the case with bill of materials, at least the advanced version, which you can now have zero quantity components listed on those bill of materials, which can be useful for listing, for example, substitute or alternate components, or useful for listing tools or fixtures that are used with that particular BOM. And then finally, not so much of a feature of advanced bill of materials, but more of a prerequisite. If you work in a manufacturing heavy environment where you do a lot of planning, a lot of supply planning, just-in-time planning, you may be thinking about implementing NetSuite's native MRP module, Material Requirements Planning. In order to do that, you have to have advanced bill of materials on, right? So that feature, that functionality requires advanced bill of materials to be on. Okay, so let's take a look, team, at the bill of materials structure. So I have a demo environment, which you can see here. I'm on an assembly record, as you can see here, and you'll notice that this one does have advanced bill of materials on. If I go to my manufacturing tab, you will see that I have a bill of materials subrecord, and then that bill of materials subrecord has a revision record. So essentially what NetSuite is done with this feature is separated the components that were previously embedded into the assembly item and broken them out into two distinct record types called a bill of materials record and a bill of materials revision record. As you can imagine, we are now able to create assembly items in NetSuite without having to specify a bill of materials at time of creation. So we've essentially taken the assembly item with its component list and broken them out into three records: the assembly item, the bill of materials, and then the bill of materials revision. This is important to keep in mind as we think about implementing the feature, and I will touch on that once we reach our considerations portion of this video. So this is the bill of materials record here I have pulled up for the specific assembly we just looked at. So here you can see I can have this bill of materials associated to many assemblies. And then within this bill of materials, I can have multiple revisions associated to this bill of materials. So one of the benefits with advanced bill of materials is it improves revision management. So you can have different bill of materials revisions and have those all exist in one time with different effective and different effective end dates. So you can see here within the bill of materials record, I have my revision record. And if I click into that, it's going to pull up this bill of materials revision record. And this is where we have our components. So at this point, you can see we have our component yield. We have our quantity, our item source, our units. We have our items, which can be components. They can be sub-assemblies. They can be non-inventory items, any labor overhead. Non-inventory items you're using, they are stored here. This is where the components actually live. Right, so from a process perspective, this isn't going to be too different than what you're probably used to with legacy bill of materials. It's only going to be a different record. All right, so what I want to talk about now, team, is considerations. So you're thinking about implementing this advanced bill of materials. What are some of the things to keep in mind? Well, one of the questions you want to answer and think about is how will existing data be impacted? So you do want to know that Advanced BOM will impact the NetSuite data structure. As I mentioned already, we are essentially breaking down that one item with a sublist of components out into three different records. So make sure that as you're testing it, and I highly recommend and can't emphasize enough that you first enable this feature in Sandbox, where you can actually test it and validate your core business processes before you go live. Very important. So make sure you walk through the different record types introduced, whether you're doing it with your administrator or a consultant or a developer or your in-house team in NetSuite. Make sure that you go through each of these records and understand at least how they differ compared to Legacy BOM. Another thing you might want to think about is how will save searches be impacted? So when you initially turn on this feature on, if you're coming from Legacy Bill of Materials, NetSuite will list a warning for you to review save searches, any scripts or integrations. The reason you want to do that is, for example, if you have any save searches that are pulling assembly component data, let's say you're pulling up quantities or maybe costs, those save searches will be impacted once you turn on Advanced Bill of Materials. So I recommend creating a list of all those different save searches you have currently in the system and having those listed or at least identified, because likely you will have to rebuild those save searches to match the new format introduced by Advanced Bill of Materials. Likewise with scripts or integrations, right? Any scripts or integrations that are touching the assembly item and its components sublist, will likely need to be updated. So I highly recommend you sit down with a developer or a consultant to review those records or those scripts and integrations and assess any impact in that space prior to go live. You may also think about how the manufacturing process will be impacted. So turning on advanced bill of materials will impact work orders. We recommend having your manufacturing team test all your critical business processes in Sandbox, so you can identify all impact or at least critical impact before you make the change in production. And that is essentially a few of the things that you'll want to keep in mind. Keep in mind, this session isn't a comprehensive session. If you need any assistance, our team of consultants is happy to step in and assist and then walk through the process with you to make sure we assess the impact accurately for your environment and develop a plan of action to test the feature in your Sandbox environment and help you implement this feature in production, right? But at the end of the day, I do want to note that while NetSuite is discontinuing support for legacy bill of materials, the change isn't an immediate need. However, it is a good idea to start thinking about making that transition now sooner than later. We hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments section. And stay tuned. There's going to be more videos from our team, and have a great day.